This changes everything for the Toronto Raptors as the team has officially acquired Brandon Ingram in a trade with the New Orleans Pelicans, dealing away Kelly Olynyk, obviously the Canadian, which hurts my heart a little bit. Bruce Brown, who's become a fan favorite since he's been playing out here on this roster, out here on this group. But now you see why the Raptors picked up his player option, why they picked him up in this trade. And we'll break down the details of this trade, but frankly, why this completely alters the course of this Raptors franchise, this Raptors approach to the trade deadline, and what we can expect for this team for the rest of the season, for impending seasons. This is game changing. So lots of stuff to break down, but folks, we went live. We were live for this trade. We were live as the trade ended up happening. Had about 1,200 people in there. So make sure if you guys haven't hit the subscribe button just yet, hit that sub button so you don't miss a single thing that's happened with the Toronto Raptors group. I mean, it's 3 a.m. right now. I'm recording an official recap of this trade, and I just want to make sure you guys are getting all of the latest news delivered to you. We try to keep you up to date on all the Brandon Ingram stuff, and it happened. So I just want to make sure you guys are keeping up to date with everything. But let's dive into this trade because I am jacked. I'm elated by what just happened. So the Raptors traded, the New Orleans Pelicans have traded Brandon Ingram to the Toronto Raptors for Bruce Brown Jr., Kelly Olynyk, 1 first-round pick, and 1 second-rounder. Now, some people might look at that and be like, "Hey, Brandon Ingram, that's a hefty price going on there for Brandon Ingram. That's a pick and a second for a guy that's an impending free agent. What's going on with this?" Well, especially for a team that right now is currently in a state of capturing a flag, bottom 5 in the entire league. Are we giving up one of our picks? No, that is not the case. The draft capital in this deal is not, our current first round and second round pick. Basically, the the draft capital that's in this one is the Raptors are betting that Ingram and his bird rights will sign with the summer. Basically, the draft capital is Indiana's 2026 first round pick, and then also the second round pick is a 2031 second. So the full package for Brandon Ingram is Bruce Brown, who again hasn't played a ton of games this season, Kelly Olynyk, who hasn't played a ton of games this season. They played a little bit as of late, and they've been pretty good. Like Kelly Olynyk, Bruce Brown, good at basketball. Don't want to disrespect those guys on the way out. Honestly, before I am, shout out to Kelly Olynyk, Canadian, desperately wanted to be here. Had his stint, got to wear the Raptors threads, has been really good for us. I really like Kelly Olynyk. I'm sad to see him go, but he'll find his footing. He'll find a good team that wants to pick him up. Kelly Olynyk, Bruce Brown. This guy bought in fully to the Toronto Raptors, even though he's dealing with injuries, even though there's lots of stuff on the go. He played his heart out with this Raptors team. So shout out to both those guys. I don't want to be disparaging or anything like that on their way out. Like those guys, Bruce Brown, like Kelly Olynyk's Canadian fan favorite, all that type of stuff. Bruce Brown, he really, we expected him to be traded for months and months and months at this point, but he ingratiated himself to a lot of Toronto Raptors fans. So shout out to Bruce Brown, shout out to Kelly Olynyk. Nothing bad to say about any of those. Like lots of love for those guys heading out. But those two guys were in the deal for Brandon Ingram and then a 2026 Indiana first-round pick, and they are projected to be very good. So that draft pick as well as a 2031 second. We're not worried about 2031. That's way off in the distance. So for a guy in Brandon Ingram, who if we look at his stats, right, do I have his stats up this season? I don't even have them up because I'm too disjointed. It's 3 a.m. in the morning. He's averaging like 22 points per game, 5 rebounds, 5 assists, only 27 years old, so he's still very, very young despite being in the NBA for such a long time. He has dealt with some injuries. He's currently dealing with an injury, which factors in to why it kind of makes sense for the Toronto Raptors to trade for him right now, because even though he's a star player, even though he's a guy that is good, he's not going to affect the tank in the short term because he'll probably be out of the lineup. He'll probably be out of the mix in terms of what's happening. The Raptors will likely still get a very high draft pick in this year's NBA draft. So he's not affecting the tank in the short term. As Blake Murphy sort of put it, as I've been jumping through reports and screenshots, the Raptors are ultimately betting that Ingram, with bird rights and ability to re-sign him in the summer, which they wouldn't have had the cap space to do, is worth the shift in rebuilding, exchanging pick equity for a player in his prime. It's a first from Indy and the second round pick. So that's the kind of details there. Obviously, we saw the second round. And then essentially, Brett Siegel revealed that I'm hearing one of the main reasons for trading Kelly Olynyk over Chris Boucher was the tax implication for the 2025-2026 season. Boucher's expiring contract plus an upcoming new contract for Ingram projects Toronto will be below the tax next year. So basically, what the deal is, what's happening is, you don't want to be in the tax if you're in the NBA right now. You desperately do not want to be in the tax because it handcuffs you for different trades. It handcuffs you for different moves. It handcuffs you for all these different things that are available to happen for your team. You're not allowed to aggregate players in trades. You're not allowed to do a whole bunch of different things. So the more years you back to back, you're over the tax. That's when the repeater tax comes in, and that's when all these restrictions comes down to play. And it hurts your ability to build a roster. Next season, without Kelly Olynyk out there in the mix, with Chris Boucher out here on expiring, the Raptors are under that tax. So they can go into next season, breathe safely, and say, hey, we aren't going to be a tax team. We'll be fine. We'll be in this situation without having to make more moves. So throwing Kelly Olynyk into that trade instead of Chris Boucher allows for that to sort of happen. Now, it sucks Kelly Olynyk had to go, but frankly, I love Chris Boucher, man. I love Chris Boucher. I went on a rant. I was saying it before the trade happened. I love Chris Boucher. I'm very, very happy he's going to be on this team and hopefully is able to sign something long term. Again, the implications of this, sort of the undertones, the way to kind of approach it is the expectation Chris Boucher isn't expiring, so he probably won't be back. But if there's an opportunity, if there's a direction for him to come back, it's more likely now he's still on the roster rather than trading him away. So that's all stuff that you're hearing. And Bruce Brown, the Chris Boucher, 10 points per game, 4 rebounds. I'm happy he's still on the roster. Now, more moves are probably coming or potentially imminent for this Raptors team. We are still under the tax. It was basically a money move that, the Raptors are still in a position to make some more moves happen. So it's we'll see. We'll see if the Raptors are pretty active on the second day of the trade deadline to take on some assets or take on some guys and see what ends up going on the go. But basically, the team is expected to be under the cap next year, so it would be weird for them to take on long-term money. But short-term money, just for the season, be very, very interesting. Now, this makes sense as to why the Toronto Raptors didn't acquire, had that whole drama going on with the Jimmy Butler trade where they were expected to grab Slow-Mo, Kyle Anderson from the Golden State Warriors. It makes sense because this deal would have been a lot weirder if he was on the team just for cap purposes and stuff. So basically, not acquiring him ended up the Toronto Raptors being able to acquire Brandon Ingram. So crafty salary cap manipulation stuff going on there for Masai Ujiri. We also have some other updates going on. Basically, look at that lineup. Look at that starting lineup, guys. Immanuel Quickley, RJ Barrett, Brandon Ingram, Scottie Barnes, and Jakob Poeltl. That's a good team. I don't care what anyone's got to say. That's a good team. That's a really good team. You have Gradey Dick off the bench as well. Ochai Agbaji off the bench as well. You have Davion Mitchell, Jamal Shead, Jacoby Walter. You have Jonathan Mobo out there in your system, right? You have Chris Boucher, who we just talked about, we just ranted about. You have, this is a good team. That's all. Jameson Battles on your team. This is a good team, man. This is a good team. I know people are rebuild. You're not getting someone better in the 2020 from the Pacers pick and Brandon Ingram. Bruce Brown, Kelly Olynyk, they were expiring. Like that's a good trade. That's a phenomenal trade. Of course, you got to extend Brandon Ingram and all that type of stuff, but he seems very bought in. Chris Haynes reporting, and this is coming from BBQ Got Next, but Chris Haynes is reporting that Brandon Ingram is excited about coming to Toronto and finds it much more appealing. Also says he feels like he can take the team to the next level. So love that attitude for Brandon Ingram. Apparently, more I read on this guy, the more excited I get about him being on this team, being in this organization, everything that's happening. So love it. I'm absolutely the more I think about this move, the more I'm in love with it. So I was disappointed at first just because my heart's attached to Pascal Siakam. That's a guy that we won a championship with. I was disappointed when he left. And then we had previous videos where we discussed Brandon Ingram. I'm like, why would you trade Pascal Siakam if you're going to go out and get Brandon Ingram? Well, they're very similar level players. Brandon Ingram's a bit younger, a bit more of a shot creator, less athletic in terms of, Pascal Siakam defense and stuff. But Brandon Ingram kind of fits around Scottie a little bit more. And the Raptors on top of the Pascal Siakam trade, because now in whole, the Pascal Siakam trade is basically Pascal Siakam, because Bruce Brown's gone, Kelly Olynyk's gone, all these guys are gone. For Pascal Siakam, for Brandon Ingram, Ochai Agbaji, and Jacoby Walter. That's a heist. That's a good deal. That's a good deal for the Toronto Raptors. So, I don't know. I love it. It's 3 a.m. here. I'm going to be breaking this down a ton over the next little while. But you guys are the best. Subscribe to the channel if you guys haven't already. Anyways, I'm signing out. Cheers.